Hi, welcome to my kitchen. It's just before Erev Rosh Hashanah. We're getting ready to make Kreplach, a traditional Rosh Hashanah treat. In the olden days, they used to make the filling in bowls like this, using tools like this. Now it's the 21st century, so we don't use that big wooden bowl. Instead, we use our very handy-dandy Cuisinart to chop our onions. I use one small yellow onion. Meat. This isn't really enough cooked meat. You can use any kind of cooked meat you like. You can use brisket. You can use leftover steak. If you're kosher, you probably wouldn't be using the leftover steak. I also like to add a little bit of ground meat for the consistency, texture, and some of the fat. I use the Cuisinart with the cutting blade. Cut the onion into small chunks. You don't want it to be too fine, but you don't want it to be too big either. Take the onion out just to make sure that it doesn't get chopped too fine when I'm chopping up the meat. The brisket slices I have here are already very thin. My mom used to like to use short ribs, and she'd spend what seemed to me like hours peeling the strips of meat off the bone. I don't use short ribs because I find that it makes for a stringy filling. There's a little bit of fat on some of the slices, and I'll cut most of it off. But I like to leave some because it gives it a little bit more flavor. I'm not sure if I have to cut them up this small, but my mom used to do it because she chopped them up in that wooden bowl with the hackfleisch. That's not quite enough meat, so I'm going to use some leftover steak. It happens to be sirloin, I think. So this definitely would not be used in a kosher. One more ingredient that I forgot to mention earlier, schmaltz. This is home rendered schmaltz with yellow onion cooked to a nice crisp. I don't eat any of this stuff, any of the grievin that are in there because it's bad for you, but it's still great to have schmaltz. If you don't want to use schmaltz, there are other products you can use. Just a little bit of oil or something like that would probably be better for you. The meat's ground up now to a pretty good consistency. But now I'm going to add just a little bit of ground meat. Many people think that this is absolutely the wrong way to make kreplach. I don't care what other people think. I'm going to add the onions back in. And about a teaspoon of schmaltz. Now I'm going to check the consistency. To me at this moment it looks a little bit dry, so I'm going to add some leftover brisket gravy that I froze with just this in mind. The last time I made brisket, my heart was young and gay. No, actually, the last time I made brisket, I decided to save some of the gravy because it was so scrumptious and would probably be useful. I froze it when I froze the brisket. Okay, before we put this in the refrigerator to get all of its flavors mixed. I'm going to add a little bit of fresh pepper and a little bit of salt. Not much. You can use a pinch of kosher salt if you prefer. Pepper smells good. Okay. I'm going to cover this with some plastic wrap and we'll be making the dough. Now it's time to make the dough. All the recipe books I've ever read said that you should put the flour on the table, make a well, add your eggs, and mix it all up, and magically it turns to dough. I've never been able to do that. My mom used to make it this way, so that's the way I'm going to make it, because otherwise I'll make a mess. My mom also always used gold medal flour. I'm sure there's absolutely no reason to do so, but she used it because her mother used it. Here we go. So I'll crack them into the bowl. I like to use a really large bowl because it makes a big mess. By the way, this is my mother's tablecloth. Any of you who knew her probably saw this tablecloth in her house. It has a big cigarette burn over there. I did this once with a whisk. It was a mistake because then all the flour got stuck in the whisk. We've got 4 eggs, lightly beaten, and I'm sorry to tell you I really have no idea how much flour I use. I use flour, I'm going to take a scoop, put it in, gently mix it in. More. I would guess I'm about up to about a cup and a half. Two cups, 2.5.
What did you see there that caused you to add more flour?
It just was still soupy. You can always put flour in, you can't take flour out. And this is still very wet, you can see. So it's not ready yet. I'm going to add more flour, but now I have to do it a little bit more slowly. Because this is where you can make the mistake of just putting in way too much flour. I'm also going to stop using the spoon. Now it's starting to turn into dough.
Wet hand, dry hand, right?
I guess. Never really thought about it.
If you have to add more flour, you can just use your hand, right?
Well, I'll use the scoop that's
right.
in there with my left hand, yeah. This is starting to shape up now. You don't want to overwork it because then it gets tough. I'm going to add this in before I look for more flour. Who knows, I may not need that much more. And you can always add more flour. See, it's not sticking to my hand anymore. You can always add more flour, but you can't take it out. So I'm glad I did that. And if there's too much flour, then it's too stiff. And it's hard to make the little hoosies, the little Kreplach, and it's hard to get them to seal. This is a very rough dough. This isn't like, you know, pasta dough through a roller. This is intended to be working person.
Intended to be a working person? I don't understand that.
It's not, it's rustic. It's not a fine cuisine. You know, the dough is going to be a little lumpy, maybe, but it's not going to be like ravioli through a pasta maker.
So at this point, you know that you have enough flour. You're just using.
No, actually, I'm going to switch this. Take the bowl away. Okay, I've transferred the dough to the table, but I don't dare try to knead it on the table because it will stick to the tablecloth. Having a cigarette burn in the tablecloth was always my mom's criterion for whether or not it was to become a dough cloth. I guess if you had a marble countertop, you wouldn't need to do this. You know, you could just do it on the counter. A wood cutting board, I think, would probably work as well. Okay, it's still sticking to itself, so we're good. If I were to get it so that it wouldn't stick to itself, then I would know that I had added too much flour. So what I'm going to do now is roll it up and cover it with a towel and let it rest for about 10 minutes. Okay, now this to me looks like about three batches. So I'm just going to cut off about a third of it. I use a real good sharp knife so it doesn't make a mess. And then put the dough back under the towel. It's still a little bit sticky, but that's not a bad thing. If you make it too unsticky, then they don't make good kreplach. Yeah, it's still sticking to my hand. That's good. See, and at this point you can add more flour if you need to, and not risk the dough. All right, here we go. You know, from the middle out, you know how to roll dough. If it starts to stick to your surface, as part of the rolling process, which it might, just put a little bit more flour on your surface. I'm not having any problem with this, so it looks like I got it right this time. You don't want to make it too thin, but you don't want to leave it too thick either. That was helpful, I bet.
Is it about as thin as a ravioli dough when you're done? Should you be able to see through it, or is that too thin?
If you can see through it, it's probably too thin. But a lot of ravioli isn't that thin anyway.
Well, a good kind is.
Well, the kind I make. Okay, now we've got the square of kreplach. If you're feeling more ambitious, you can make a bigger square, but this is the size I'm comfortable with. I take my knife and I cut them in strips, roughly 1.5 to 2 inches. Then I cross-cut them the same. Okay. It's a good idea to have a small dish of water to dip your fingers in. Okay, we've cut up the dough into small squares, and now I'm putting teaspoon-sized pieces of the mixture on the dough. Even though this one isn't a rectangle or a square, I'm going to pretend that it is. I'm going to kind of squeeze it until it resembles that shape. I'm going to press the two sides of the dough together. If the dough's not too thick, they will just, all you'll need is one squish. And they go, and this one's going to be shaped strangely, I don't care. Put them on a floured area because we're going to let them dry.
And how long will they have to dry on the floured area?
You're not going to like my answer.
I already know the answer.
Till they're dry enough.
Right.
Okay, so I've finished closing up all the kreplach. I'm setting them on the floured surface, and you can see that I've already top floured some of them. I'm going to do that again and just cover them with a very small layer of flour. In about 20 minutes, 10 minutes maybe, I don't know, I'll come back in and turn them over. I'll keep doing that for about an hour and a half. Letting them dry. I think that's how long it is.
And the amount of filling and dough that you made will make how many batches like this?
I'm hoping 3. Okay, so now we're done with all 3 batches, and the time has come to actually count the kreplach. Now, the origin of the counting came from when I ate the neighbor's kreplach. So my mother always counted them so that I would know that she knew how many of them she was sending up. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so here we are. I think I said it would take an hour and a half to 2 hours, but clearly I was wrong. It took about 4 hours. You keep turning them as they go, and when they start to feel kind of solid on the outside edges, then it's ready to go. Now these guys aren't quite as ready. So what I'm going to do is freeze them. My mom always cooked them before she froze them, but I think it's better to freeze them and then cook them when you're ready to use them. Okay, so we have about a dozen of these left. They're kind of, you can see they've kind of shrunk up a little bit, and that's great. And we're going to put them in water, salted boiling water. When they're ready, we're going to cook them for about 10 minutes. When they come to the top, pick one out, take a bite. You'll see whether or not it's ready to eat. Enjoy a good gesund.